All right, we are live, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome once again to the next episode in the Red Delta Project podcast and live stream Q&A. We do this live every Wednesday night, or maybe you're listening to the audio playback here on the podcast player of your choice. It's the podcast where we talk about fundamental principles of health and fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom in your fitness lifestyle. As always, I'm Matt Schifferly, founder of the Red Delta Project and author of the books that sponsor these episodes. That's how we support these podcasts. There's links down below in the description for those, as well as the other resources I recommend, like NOSC suspension training systems and WorldFit isometric equipment. So how are we doing out there, everybody? I am using some new equipment today. So if you could just please let me know in the comments, can you hear me okay? Can you see me okay? Particularly, is the video quality better? I know a lot of folks have said that the video quality has been lacking lately. So a lot of that can be chalked up to like the streaming bandwidth and stuff. But I got some new camera equipment and stuff that I'm using. So please let me know in the comments real quick before we jump into today's topic if you can hear me okay, if you can see me good, if it's better than before. It's a little bit of a different scenario and stuff. Awesome audio, clear, loud and clear. Very good. Thank you, Mike G. L is in the house. Very good. All right, so let's dive into today's topic. Today's topic, I did a little bit of almost a clickbaity thing on the Instagram notification where I talked about the title of this one is Making Emotional Eating Work for You. Or in other words, the way I also like to use this is the benefits of emotional eating. All right. So I know that's a little like, what? You got to be kidding me, because emotional eating is usually referred to as a bad thing in our fitness culture. It's usually something that, oh, I'm such an emotional eater and I can't get over emotional eating. And there's books on Amazon of how to finally overcome emotional eating. However, in my research on one of my new topics for my new books that I'm researching, because RDP is always about getting to the rock solid foundation of what's really in charge of fitness. I keep coming across a common theme, and that theme is that yes, fitness is about our physical body and what our body is doing, and yes, there's the intellectual side of it as well. What do you know you should be doing? You learn how to do push-ups and you learn about the science behind it. However, the physical and the mental side are only roughly about like 10%, a very small percentage of what's actually in charge of your fitness success. The vast majority of what makes you successful isn't what you do, and it's not what you know, it's how you feel on an emotional level. Now, back to the topic of emotional eating, the reason why this is important to understand is because whenever people are like, oh, emotional eating, it's a bad thing, I can't stop emotional eating, I sit and I think to myself, so what? We're supposed to have like non-emotional eating? Like eating as if we're cyborgs, like Spock, on Star Trek, like illogical, Captain, you must have your proper protein to carbohydrate ratio kind of thing. Okay, maybe if you're a completely feelingless, emotionless being, that might happen. But the fact of the matter is, emotions are part of, and in fact, a very big part of what constitutes our daily behaviors, including diet and including exercise. So all the lessons I'm talking about today also apply very much to exercise as well. It's a twofer kind of thing. So when we're approaching diet, and we're thinking, I got to get this emotional component out of it, we actually don't want that. The benefits of a healthy diet come from just as much of an emotional place as having an unhealthy diet. And that's why it's important to understand that we can't separate our dietary choices from our emotional state, nor should we. But when we hear about emotional eating, what we're really actually referring to is negative emotional eating. We're making negative choices, detrimental choices, usually in a detrimental or negative emotional space. Okay, that's where it's like, I'm bored, I'm stressed, or whatever, I'm going to plow through a pint of Ben and Jerry's, yada, yada. And this is not only a reflection of our emotional state, but it's also a reflection of how we typically address food in our fitness culture. Because the vast majority of dietary advice out there is not about being healthy. It's not about your well-being. It's not about being healthier and stronger and more vibrant and all these benefits and stuff. Instead, a lot of the advices out there regarding diet are more of an avoidance mechanism in nature. Don't mess up. Don't eat the bad food. Don't screw up your diet. Don't go and do dumb things. Don't do unhealthy things. Don't do things that are going to make you feel sick and get fat and hurt your performance, right? That's the bulk of the messages out there. You open up diet books and it's all like doom and gloom stuff. Like, if you eat rice, you're doing this bad thing. And there's a ad on YouTube you see all the time. It's like, if you think rice is good for you, think again, right? It's all this doom and gloom stuff. And it's not unwarranted, but what it does is it puts us in this place emotionally where we're not trying to eat for the sake of benefit. We're not trying to actually be healthy and vibrant and progressively healthier over time. We're setting ourselves up for avoidance mechanisms. And this applies too with health or exercise as well. Sometimes when people are like, I just don't want to be fat. I don't want to be weak. I don't want to feel uncomfortable in my own skin. And when we are in this place of avoidance, we're setting ourselves up to basically have a negative emotional response to food and exercise and everything else. And the very best you can hope for from that is to barely keep your head above water. It's like jumping in the water and saying, I hope I don't drown. So you're going to be satisfied with merely keeping your head above water and surviving and just barely getting by. So that's why we're always just barely getting by. And if anything negative comes along, we get stressed, we have a bad day, or we fall off, we quickly find ourselves submerged and in deep water, metaphorically speaking, right? So that's why the approaches here at Red Delta Project are more about going beyond just avoidance. Because from an emotional standpoint, when we are finding ourselves in a stressful situation, like getting chased by a tiger or something in our, primal days and stuff, avoiding bad things is extremely powerful and it's extremely effective, but it's also extremely exhausting and it's also short term, because the second you stop being in that threatening situation, you take your foot right off the gas. Oh, I outran the lion, so I don't need to keep running. Oh, I ate well enough, so I'm probably not going to do damage in my diet. Okay, so I'm not going to make my diet any better. I got to the gym and I worked out just barely hard enough to not fall backwards in my fitness. So you take your foot off the gas. As a result, it's like swimming and you're barely keeping your head above water and you're thinking, this is good enough. I'm good here. But you never get to those higher levels where the real good stuff is, where you get really strong and feel like $1,000,000 and look even better and love this whole fitness thing. So the approaches to RDP have always been, you don't need to focus so much on the avoidance of bad things if you're concentrating on pursuing good things, right? If you're focusing on building wealth, you don't need to worry about poverty. If you're focusing on being strong and healthy and vibrant, you don't need to worry about illness to a large degree. I mean, illness can find anybody, but you hear what I'm saying, right? You don't need to worry about getting fatter if you're focusing on having a diet and exercise habit and plan that builds your body as effectively as possible. So go beyond merely subsisting. And that's where positive emotional eating comes from, because the 4 appetites that I talk about in my book, Fitness Independence, link down below, shameless plug, I know, it's not about let's avoid being sick and fat and overweight and avoiding bad foods, because that's mere subsistence. That's barely getting by. That's why I often tell people, like, I don't do the diets that are trending and everything like that, because I set myself to a much higher standard. I want a hell of a lot more from my diet and my exercise habits than to barely get by, to just not be fat, to just not be sick, right? I want to be thriving. I want to be going above and beyond what I thought was even possible. And you're not going to do that if you're merely avoiding the bad outcomes in both diet and exercise. You have to constantly keep your mind going for, how do I do this better, 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 progression all the time. And so in order to do that from a dietary standpoint, we have to go beyond just avoiding the bad foods and avoiding the negative outcomes and thinking, how do I just get more benefit from the diet? How do I enjoy my food even more? How do I feel even better physiologically? How do I have something and it's just so good and satisfying and enjoyable, and it makes me feel like I just want to go out and hike up a 14er here in Colorado, right? When you set your sights on stuff like that, all of the negative stuff, you don't even need, it's like so far in the distance of your rear view mirror, you don't even need to worry about it, because you're always striving to get more and more and better and more benefit from your diet. So those 4 appetites of satisfy your hunger, satisfy your nutritional needs, satisfy the need for enjoyment and palatability, and your need to just maintain a good energy level. When we pursue the satisfaction of those appetites as effectively as possible, your diet becomes so much more healthy. Plus, you're making your decisions from a positive emotional place. You're eating things because you love to eat them. You're eating them because you love the way they make you feel. You're eating them from a positive, I want to do well by me kind of thing. And when you're at that place emotionally with diet and exercise, you go way beyond merely getting by. So the primal caveman who outruns the saber-toothed tiger and is like, phew, I'm out of danger. Now I can take my foot off the gas. But compared to the caveman who's like, I want to run and I want to get faster as a runner so I can hunt better and I can avoid predators and I can just be a better runner, they're going to keep running. They're going to learn how to run better. So they're not merely just outrunning the tigers, they're becoming the leaders of the clan, because they can do everything else a hell of a lot better. So the lesson you want to take home with this today is we want to address eating always from an emotional place, because you're not going to get it non-emotional. We are emotional creatures on our most fundamental level, and trying to remove and ignore the emotional aspect of diet and exercise is just foolhardy. You cannot separate the two. But when you go from merely negative and avoidance behaviors and more to a positive emotional place, then you tap into the real superpower of your emotional subconscious, because you're doing how you feel. You're going to be obeying your emotional subconscious beliefs 9 times out of 10. We're more directed in our decisions by how we feel about things than what we think about things, right? You can learn everything there is to know about nutrition, but if someone brings in a baker's dozen of donuts in the office Friday morning, how you feel about those donuts is actually what's much more in charge on whether or not you're going to be double fisting the donuts while drinking 15 Red Bulls, right? So when we have the higher standard of doing things because it's beneficial and you enjoy it and you get as much benefit as possible from your diet and exercise choices, then you're going from negative emotional eating to positive emotional eating, which is a hell of a lot more rewarding. It's a hell of a lot easier to stick to, and it brings a hell of a lot better benefits and rewards as well. All right. Let's jump into some of these questions here. Now, again, new format here. So actually what I've done is, instead of using the webcam on my laptop, this is the camera on my phone. And again, a lot of people like the video quality isn't very good. And it may very well just be the fact of the streaming service. Like, you can only get so much information going through an internet streaming service, but the camera on my phone is way better. But the downside is my phone has a much smaller screen. So as a result, it's going to be a little bit harder for me to address comments and questions. So I will do my absolute best. And also, as a reminder, if you put "Hey Matt" in the subject line, I know that is directed towards me, and that's a question you want me to address. Al Painter, yeah, I ate emotionally after the Bills game Sunday. I agree with you, man. That loss on Kansas City, but you can't take it away from Kansas City, Al. Like, they played really, really well. Buffalo did what they could, but unfortunately, they just didn't quite show up as much. All right, Mike G. Hey, Matt, I'm on week 3 of the GMB Elements program. It's awesome. I completely agree. I did that program myself. I'm excited to train every day. Body feels great. Has already improved my mountain biking. Want to build muscle, but this was the weak link. Yeah, the Elements program, it's amazing what it does for addressing those links you didn't know were not being addressed. That's one of the great things about GMB, I find, is you look at the Elements program and some of those moves and everything, it's like, well, it doesn't look like it's very much, but it loosens the hips, it balances the legs, it opens up the shoulders, it built more shoulder stability, back stability with the bear crawls and everything. It really doesn't look like much, but when you practice it in the program that they have, it's amazing how rewarding it is. It really is. They have a fantastic program. Highly recommended for pretty much anyone. Next question, Kimberly. Hey, Matt. So how do we stop snacking when stressed and anxious? So very good question, Kimberly. Outstanding. Refer to the old adage that we have bad habits for good reasons. So when we're stressed, when we're anxious or bored, whatever, right? And we're turning to food, what you're doing is you're trying to satisfy a need, oftentimes an emotional need, with food. And this is a very deeply ingrained primal urge because when we consume food, it creates a cascade of physiological, mental, and emotional changes. So it is very effective to a degree. So when you're turning to food, and the reason why we often turn to food is just because it's the easier way to go about it. All right, it's like I need to relieve some of the stress, and as they say, it's you're either in fight or flight or rest and digest. So your body's saying, well, if I eat something, then I'll go more into rest and digest and kind of get those hormones, those stress hormones to subside a little bit. But then once you're done with that, it goes right back up because you're not addressing the real issue at hand. So the key is don't avoid something, right? You're stressed, you need to take action. Something needs to be addressed. You're just doing it with food. So the answer is address it with something else other than food, right? So I can go for a long walk. Being out in nature is really good. Sometimes getting away from whatever the environment is, like getting away from my computer, away from the office, outside. I used to do this all the time when I worked in downtown Denver. I'd go and walk around the park. There's dogs around and stuff. You can change the job that you're doing, right? So you can, instead of working on one part of your project, you can work on a different part of your project. Talking with people is also extremely effective. So if you're at work, you want a snack or something, you're stressed out, you can just talk to your coworker saying, I'm stressed about this because of yada, yada. And that may be a better way to solve that actual scenario, right? Now, it's important to recognize that there's not necessarily anything terribly bad about using snacking in this scenario. The reason why we get in trouble is because emotional eating isn't so much like when we're stressed and we want to eat an ice cream bar or something. That's not entirely bad. It becomes bad when that's our only ability to deal with a stressful situation. So every single time you're turning to the candy jar. Now, I'll do this myself plenty of times. I oftentimes will grab one of my, seltzer waters and stuff because I love that bubbly sweetness. I'll get outside. The trick is to have a number of things you can do in a stressful situation to help you cope with the situation. Lots of things. So maybe list it out. Try different things out because the more different stuff you have, the more tools you have in your toolbox. And yes, going down to the 7-Eleven and grabbing a Snickers bar can be one of those things as long as it's the one that you do fairly seldom. But sometimes there's nothing like just hitting the spot with a little bit of a treat in the middle of the day, as long as you're just not doing it all the time. So lots of different ways to cope with it or just hit it head on is the recommendation I give you. All right, let's go with some more questions here. Zabe. Hey, Matt, still struggling with sticking to my diet. Even when I maintain balance and fill up on mainly healthy foods, I'll still overly stuff myself on sweet things when not even hungry, out of control. I hear you, Zabe. And so what that's telling me is that you are filling yourself up physically. You're satisfying the need to eat, maybe your hunger and your nutritional needs, but you're still not totally satisfying the other appetites. Maybe your energy level's a little bit low and you need a bit of a sugar hit, or you just want something other than steak and potatoes for dinner every single night, right? So with this, I always say, well, bring some of that stuff into your diet. Bring a little bit of whatever you're finding in your diet, because abstaining usually brings on the cravings, and then you have the binge. So if you're like me, I used to binge ice cream all the time because I kept telling myself I can't eat ice cream. And I'd go like 2 or 3 days without ice cream, and then I'd plow through 3 pints of Ben and Jerry's. That's not an exaggeration. But now I eat ice cream most every day, but it's like 2 or 3 spoonfuls. It's not a whole lot. So it's a little bit here and there. And when you allow yourself a little bit, pardon me, when you're a little bit every single day, it doesn't add up to a whole lot, but it keeps you satisfied. So I would recommend going with that. Also, look for what kind of an appetite, palatable-wise, are you really trying to satisfy? Is it salt? Some people are like, I need salty. I crave salty stuff, so they plow through chips. Some people, it's sweet. Some people, it's more of like a texture thing, like a crunch. What are you really craving? Because there's lots of healthy ways you can satisfy that craving. Like for me, sweet and bubbly, yeah, seltzer water. There you go, right? Or if it's salty, some pumpkin seeds, a little trail mix or something. You want some crunch, a little bit of something that's got a good crunchy texture. When you know your appetites as well as possible, you also get the most direct line on how to satisfy them as effectively as possible. And the best way to keep yourself from binging is to know how to satisfy your appetites as effectively as possible. Hope that helps for you, Zabe. Jethro Bradley. Excuse me. Question. Hey, Matt. I tend to binge eat in the evenings. I think it's boredom and work stress. Any tips? Should I attempt to replace the ice cream and chips, something healthy, or just try to abstain? This is very common, and it's always kind of in the evening sort of thing. And that's simply because towards the end of the day, your energy level, your physical, your mental, and emotional energy is low. Right? So when you get up in the morning, it's a lot easier to kind of get in your routine, and you're like, I got to get to work. Okay, so I got my usual breakfast, which is usually healthy and everything. But at the end of the day, everything kind of settles down, and there's some free time, and you're tired. And now, again, your brain and everything's going from that fight or flight to the rest and digest sort of mode. And that's when you have nothing against, like, I can't possibly resist the ice cream. So in this case, like, I don't abstain. I don't resist it at all. I'm like, okay, ice cream time. And I'll take a bit of ice cream, maybe in a little bowl or something like that. And I just won't overdo it. I'll have a portion of it. I'll have a little bit of it, right? And a little bit of sweet at the end of the day. It's a little bit of reward. At the end of the day, we all want to feel like we've give ourselves a pat on the back and something that's rewarding at the end of the day. So I think it's a very healthy thing to do. It's something I haven't done nearly enough myself, because the past couple of months, I've driven myself straight into the ground trying to finish my latest book. By the way, the paperback version just became available the other day. And I was just like, work, never take any time off, never give yourself an inch. And I drove myself into the ground and got really sick. But when I find myself giving myself more leniency, particularly at the end of the day, play a little video games, have a little ice cream, I have, some corn chips with salad for dinner kind of thing, it takes the edge off. And so this is the real crux of healthy eating. It's not about don't ever mess up. It's, can you eat those foods in a healthy way, right? The healthiness factor isn't inherently born in the foods you eat. You can eat carrots in an unhealthy way. A friend of mine in high school did just that. It was not pretty, believe me. But if you can manage to eat ice cream in a healthy way, which usually means not eating too much of it, being aware of that palatability, like, okay, couple of bites, how does it feel? How does it taste? You're enjoying it. You're not doing it mindlessly. You're not watching Netflix and, oh, the pint is gone kind of thing. You're mindfully eating, basically means you're paying attention. And when you get to the point where you're like, I'm good. You'll probably find, okay, that only took like 2 Oreo cookies. All right, no problem. You put the rest away, or you have it in the cupboard already, right? How do you eat those foods in a healthy way? That's a much better way to go about it, because then you can literally have your cake and eat it too. I'm going to take a little bit of trial and error, but that's what I recommend. Greg Dovier. Hey, Matt, do you still use gymnastics rings? No, I haven't used gymnastics rings in a dog's age, largely just because I prefer handles on the suspension straps. The Nosk Trainers just get more out of it. It's easier to set up, easier to adjust, more comfortable in the hand. You get the foot slings, easier for me to do things like dips and stuff. It's just more comfortable, much more than I prefer. But it's really a personal preference sort of thing, rings versus the handles. Al Painter's good question here. Hey, Matt, my friend is having, quote, friend in quotes, is having a hard time staying motivated. He wanted to know a few tips to keep his head in training and a few things to do when the brain and body don't play nice in a workout. Very good question here, Alan. This again, diet and exercise. What works for one will work for the other on a fundamental level. So remember, my friends, that ultimately motivation is an emotional balance sheet. Once again, we're going to the emotions here. You can't think your way to motivation, right? You can't just read a Facebook post and be like, you know, the winner is the best or whatever sort of thing, right? That might get you kind of rah, 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 and then as soon as you put your phone down, it's all gone. Emotion boils down to that emotional balance sheet where your subconscious is saying, all right, here's what we're doing. Here's the emotional benefit I'm getting out of it versus the emotional cost, right? Now, if the emotional benefit is much higher than the emotional cost, you'll have motivation to do it, no problem, every single day, you're good. But when we're losing motivation, that balance sheet's going down a little bit and saying, it's really just feeling like it's costing me more effort to do this on an emotional level. And it's just not really doing much benefit for you. It's not really working that well for you. So what you do in this scenario is a couple of things. One is make sure that you're keeping the perceived cost of the activity as low as possible. Right? So if you've got to jump through 15 hurdles to get your workout done, try removing some of those. And for some people, it's like getting to the gym at the end of a workday. It's crowded. I can't find parking. I hate this gym. There's the smelly guy on the treadmill and all these sorts of things versus I can go out for a run around my neighborhood. And then you're like, oh, the fresh air, and I can see my neighbors, and it's so nice to be outside, and I got my favorite playlist. So then you start getting that emotional balance sheet to tip out, and you're like, I really enjoy running outside. I hate the damn treadmill. You're still getting your run in, but you're doing things that are more emotionally rewarding versus the emotionally draining. So also, don't be afraid to change things however you want. Remember, when you understand the fundamentals of fitness, you can change your diet and exercise program a million ways from here till Tuesday and still be fine. Don't be in the dogmatic approaches that say this is the only way you can do this. You have to do it that way. Chances are really good you don't have to do it that way. So make any sort of changes that you feel in the moment. If you're in the gym and you're like, oh, I don't feel like doing pull-ups, I'd rather do pull downs with bands. Great, wonderful. You're still getting resistance in that pull chain. It's still going to be roughly fundamentally the same exact thing. So if you have an inkling to do something different or change something up, go for it. And it's probably going to be more beneficial in the long run. So what makes you feel better and what is less emotionally draining? Very good questions there, Al. Fu Lee, good question here. Is your back straight when you do pistol squats? Nope, it does have a natural curve to it. For sure, especially towards the bottom. You're going to have a little bit of that tilt in your pelvis there, which is perfectly fine. In fact, your back is made to move. Never forget that your spine is just like every other joint in your body. It's made healthy through movement. Keeping a joint locked in place is actually degrading the joint over time. Now that, yes, the whole keep your back straight, that does apply to heavy external loads. You have a bar on your back, you're front squatting, you're doing deadlifts, yes, but it's only in those situations, all right? When you're dealing with heavy external loads, when you have no external loads, that whole keep your back straight thing doesn't really apply nearly as much. Great question, fantastic, thank you so much. Let's see what more questions here I can answer. Fortunately on my phone here, I can't see as many questions at once. So I gotta scroll through here and see. Oh, good, I can pop it up. Iman, hey Matt, what are your thoughts on PMA, positive mental attitude workouts? Are you doing burpees throughout the day, going for a run just for the mood boosting benefits? Absolutely, man. Fantastic. Because we know that physical activity has a mental and emotional payoff to it. And oftentimes, it's very well worth doing things just for the emotional payoff, just for the mental payoff. And we see this happen all the time in fitness. Like I've got a client who likes a particular ab exercise. And she does it, and she's like, oh, it targets the lower abs. And she's always complaining about the little bit of belly fat she has over her lower abs. And I've been with her over a million times on how that exercise does absolutely nothing whatsoever for the belly fat in that particular area, because you can't target belly fat and all that. We all know this very well. She knows this. She knows it intellectually. But when she does that exercise, it makes her feel good. She feels positive and strong and emotional payoff for it. And for that reason alone, we do it. We do it. It makes her feel good. If an exercise makes you feel good, particularly doing a certain way, I say it's probably worth it, because ultimately the physiological benefits of an exercise are oftentimes the smaller reason to do it versus the emotional benefits that we get from it. Because if you get a good emotional payoff from your exercise or your diet or your workout or whatever, you're going to have plenty of motivation to do it, even if it's not working, even if it does almost nothing for you whatsoever and you have no results moving forward. But even if things are moving forward and you get no emotional payoff from it, you're probably not going to have a lot of motivation to stick with it for very long. So very good, Iman. Whatever exercise makes you feel good. For me, it's like throwing side kicks. I love throwing my side kicks. Makes me feel good. Am I going to be fighting bad guys with it in the gym or anything? No, but it just makes me feel good. And that's good enough reason to do it. Crack, crack. On your point on mindful eating, I've adjusted my eating by waiting until the food in my mouth is in my stomach. It's helped me manage my ravenous appetite. Excellent advice. Absolutely. If you've ever gone over to one of the best nutrition resources on the web, Precision Nutrition, highly recommended. One of their big tenant advices that they give people is slow down your eating. In fact, they're so confident in that they will literally say that just slowing down your pace of consuming food alone will probably take care of a lot of things that you struggle with eating. So things like that, sometimes you hear people say, oh, I chew my food 15 times. I don't care what kind of advice you have, put down the fork every single time. If you can slow down your eating rather than just plowing through your food, that alone, just that can make a big difference in the healthiness of your diet. Like I was saying earlier, it's not just about the food that you're eating, whether it's healthy or not. It's can you consume the food in a healthy way? And eating a little bit slower is definitely right up there. Fantastic point. Thank you so much for mentioning that. Felix, yeah. Hey, Matt, what's your grind style calisthenics version 2.0 recommendation for programming isometric holds like the lateral chain level 2 foot on top plank? Thanks, my friend. So recommendations as far as performance requirements and stuff. So especially for the support chains, like lateral and stuff like that, a lot of that really does boil down to, well, how does the exercise feel? Do you have control for it? Do you have the sense that you're creating tension throughout the entire chain? So with the isometrics, typically in grind style calisthenics, I recommend somewhere between about 15 to 30 seconds for your various sets. Again, sets and timing are the same thing. Repetitions are just a timing mechanism. So typically, something around 15 to 20, 30 seconds or so is kind of mid-grade, mid-range repetition range, sort of like 12 to 15 reps. Maybe a little bit higher than that, depending on the exercise, of course. So I would recommend going with something that allows you to really feel good about the exercise, maybe a little bit longer for the lateral chain, just because it's hard for people to knit that one together. So I would say lateral chain, hold for 20 to 45 seconds each side, 2 to 3 sets. Once you can do that pretty comfortably, move up to the next level for the lateral chain. Nathan, very good. Nathan Maxfield. Hey, Matt, I feel great whenever I do exercise, but I think I'm addicted to feeling like shit, so I stop after a few days or weeks. How can I continue the good feelings? Absolutely, Nathan. So there's a couple of things that may be going on here. One is check in with are you getting that emotional payoff from driving yourself into the ground? Now, this is one of the biggest hangups that people get trapped in within our fitness culture, because we've been kind of taught for so long that the reason why exercise is effective is because it beats the snot out of us. Right? To this day, I've got clients who are like, they're only happy and telling me it's a good workout if they're sweaty, exhausted, and sore as hell the next day. And I'm trying to get them around the other way, because fundamentally, exercise is effective if it teaches you something, if you're upgrading your performance. But I get it. Like, I get satisfied from the pump and feeling like I can't lift my arms afterwards and stuff too. So what I would say is back off a little bit on that, chasing that feeling of I've got to drive myself into the ground, and have a little bit more of that attention of how am I improving how well I do the exercise? Because the stimulus for physiological adaptation does not solely come from stress. In fact, the stress we exhibit upon our system may be an ever-increasing influence to it. In fact, there are studies where they've literally taken people, exercised them, and driven them into the ground and created all sorts of muscle damage and everything, and they've had close to zero stimulus or any adaptation whatsoever. So we want to make sure that when we're exercising, we are exercising for the purpose of progressive performance, improving how well you can do the exercise. More weight, more reps, better range of motion. You have to improve something. And that's why with my freestyle approach to working out, people are like, well, how do you know when you're supposed to work out if you're not on a schedule? I tell them I work out when I feel I can be productive with that muscle group. Like, I could do lunges every single day. I can drive my legs into the ground every single day. But if hard work and effort and driving yourself into the ground was enough, it'd be case closed. We'd all get the results we want. But your results come from productivity. How effectively can you do the exercise? So when I'll do my exercise, I'll check in and be like, yeah, but can you do this in a productive way? Are you teaching yourself something? Are you improving something? If that's the answer, then I go for it, right? But if you're starting your workout and you're like, I like to feel good, but I'm not quite just feeling it like I can really do much with this, then take it back a notch, right? Just kind of loosen up, shake it out a little bit. Don't drive yourself into the ground. You don't have to drive yourself into the ground, and you're still going to feel good. In fact, you'll probably feel even better if you have those movement sessions where you're not exhausting yourself and chasing that fatigue. This was a lesson I got when I was a bike racer. Because when I was a bike racer in college, my attitude was every time on the bike, exhaustion is my objective. I want to ride until my legs fall off, and I'm going 100% balls out every single time. And I burned out by senior year. It's like, I can't even look at a bike. I'm exhausted, but I loved that feeling, right? Until after college, and instead of always racing the clock all the time, my buddies and I, we just go out and mountain bike. We just go out and ride, and we some of it would be faster, some of it would be slower. We'd stop and appreciate a view and eat a granola bar. It was much more casual, and that actually felt better than go, 100% all the time. So take your foot off the gas a little bit, and I think you're going to even feel better about it physically and emotionally. Michael's in the house, Drop White Daddy. Good evening, Coach Matt. Good to see you, Michael. Thank you so much for coming on. Fantastic. What other questions can I answer for you folks today? Let me see if I missed anything. Scrolling through on here. Mike G. Hey, Matt, would you say you're more of a planner / worrier or often stay in the present moment? How has this impacted your training? Well, Mike, I definitely was much more of a worrier, stressor and stuff, especially pre-COVID and stuff like that. But over the past couple of years, I've gotten a lot more, I guess the buzzword would be present and just feeling good about what I'm doing. And a big way that I've done this is just to practice more appreciation and gratitude for what I've got. When we're practicing and having more appreciation for what we have, we are more present. And at the same time, we are more mindful of just the good that is in our lives. Like right now, I appreciate that I can do this. Like I can talk to all of you folks in this live podcast, and my phone is working great. I have audio, thank heavens. I've solved all those audio issues, right? I've got so many great things going on right now talking to you folks. And if I stay present with that and appreciate that, then I'm feeling good right now. I'm emotionally getting a reward from doing this. But if I turn my attention towards things away from this and thinking, oh gosh, I got to get up at 4 a.m. tomorrow, and I've got to do this thing, and I got to make sure I got all these other things. If I'm living too much in the future and worrying about that, I'm not going to appreciate anything that I have right now. So I could have the greatest thing going on right now at my feet. And because my mind and attention is elsewhere, it wouldn't matter whatsoever. So practice more appreciation, gratitude to the things going on right now. And that's going to get away from that worrying state. Fantastic. Very good. Thank you so much. Jeffrey, I just can't resist spaghetti and meatball burritos. Oh my goodness. I never heard of such a thing, but I ditto that on the spaghetti and meatballs. That's one of my favorites as well. Another one from Nathan here. Hey, Matt, I drive truck over the road and do well when out, but when I get home, I binge on all the goodies for 4 days. What mental strategies can I implement to avoid this? Well, that's impressive, Nathan, because usually when I'm on the road, that's when I start to get a lot more loose in my diet as well. In fact, for me, it's always been like road trip, time to hit the convenience store and get me a bag of Twizzlers. That was always my big road trip indulgence. So very impressive. So again, we can look at the idea of having just a little bit of something that you can have of some of those goodies on the road. So you're getting little bits, so you're not feeling like you're depriving yourself. Again, it's probably maybe a bit of a stress management sort of thing. So you finally get home and you're like, and you go from that fight or flight to rest and digest sort of thing, probably a little more hardcore because you're spending a lot of time on the road. You got a million things going on. You're very distracted, so you're not thinking about food. Then you come home and suddenly everything settles down. So I would find more activities, things to be doing when you are at home, hobbies, interests, get outside, play with friends, kids, family, whatever. Just more things to fill in that time is what I would recommend. As always, observe the stoplight strategy for your food environment as well. So stock your home up with lots of green light goodies, lots of healthy foods, yellow light foods, the snacks and everything like that you don't have trouble eating in moderation. Have a little bit of that in your environment, but keep it at kind of out of sight, out of mind. And the stuff that you just go whole hog on, not in the house. Go out for it. If pizza's your big thing, like don't have 5 frozen pizzas in your freezer, go out for a slice, make it a special occasion. But red light foods are things that you don't have much control over, not in the house. Full stop, if possible. I know when you're in family environments, it can be a little bit of a different scenario. You got to negotiate it with other people living with you. But if possible, get those things just out of your home and you enjoy that stuff away from the home. All right, let's see what more questions we got. Just a couple more here. Al Painter's coming on. Bike. Since I went back to flat pedals and 5.10 shoes on the MTB, my ankles and hips feel better post-ride. Interesting. Love to hear your thoughts on being clipped versus flats. To be honest with you, Al, I really cannot understand the flat thing. That's gotten really popular out here in Colorado as well. Every time I go out riding, it's almost to the point where I see more people on the flats than clipped in. And yeah, true to form, like I haven't ridden flats in a dog's age, but man, I can't imagine that's possibly better than being clipped in. And maybe I'm just an old fogey for having that old belief and I just won't give up on it and stuff. But every time I look at it, I'm like, what am I missing? It just doesn't make much sense. Plus, if you are on flats, you want to, of course, as you noted, like still be wearing stiff-soled shoes. So you're still wearing cycling shoes. You don't want to be wearing like Nike Air Jordans or something like that. So you're still wearing the shoes, and I figure, well, if I'm going to have the shoes, I might as well clip into the pedals. So that's my opinion, but again, it's not based on really much experience. So an opinion without experience is just a guess, as I always say. Maybe sometime next week or next summer, I will get on a flat pedal bike and change my opinion on it. But yeah, it's just more control. Control's the big one for me. I need to feel grounded into my pedals. Crack rock, I can't say that. Crack rock. Hey, Matt, if you had the time and resources to make a video on YouTube that wasn't fitness related, what would it be? That's a very good question. To be honest with you, that I really don't know. Probably something more along the lines of just getting more deep into the psychology of how we function as human beings. As I'm doing more research for my next book, I'm trying to research a lot more on the fundamental laws of human nature. And I find that the more I learn about this, the more I'm realizing that the vast majority of people are on autopilot and they're just kind of going wherever the winds blow them in their decisions of everyday life. And they're falling prey to a lot of the manipulative practices that people who do understand the principles of human nature are using against them. And this is used against them to recruit them into sort of dogmatic ideas, things that are against their interests, manipulative methods. It's kind of scary, but it's also hopeful. It's like all principles in life. Like when you understand it, you can use it to your advantage. But if you don't understand it, someone else is going to use it to their advantage. And things like, for example, the law of the path of least resistance. Right? We all follow the path of least resistance. It's not something you can fight. It's not something we can fight against, right? So when we're trying to move forward in life, what I'm learning is you can't change your ability to follow the path of least resistance. You're going to follow the path of least resistance every single day, but you can change where the path is going. You can build your own path. If you're not proactively building your own path, then you're going to follow what other path that someone else laid down for you. And usually it's not going to lead you in a direction you ultimately want to go. So something along those lines. It's still kind of fitness related, personal development related, but it's fascinating stuff, kind of scary as well. Question from Kimberly. Hey, Matt, does body weight and barbell exercise transfer well enough they could alternate in workouts, i.e. bench press, push-ups, and so on? Absolutely, Kimberly, yes. The best transfers over you're probably going to experience is overhead pressing and handstand work, or any pushing work, or squats ultimately change. Basically, the more similar you're moving from one to the other, the more it will transfer from one to another. But a lot of times what I see happening is push-ups and bench press don't magically transfer over very well, because a lot of times people will have like a wide grip bench press, elbows flared out, and then they start doing push-ups and they're much closer in. So it's different enough that it kind of goes, it's a little bit unusual sort of thing. But yeah, fundamentally, you're still doing the same thing. Push, pull, squat, flexion, extension, rotation, lateral stuff. So it shouldn't be that much of a difference. So one of the ways that you can benefit from using multiple tools is to recognize how the tools make you feel different. So, I feel this exercise much more in my hamstrings with bridges, but when I do deadlifts, they're not in the hamstrings nearly as much. So why is that? Because ultimately, you're the one creating the difference. It's a big mistake we often make of like, the tool is creating the difference. The exercise is creating the difference. Shouldn't be that much of a difference from changing tools, right? If you go from deadlift to bridge, they're fundamentally both hinge movements. If you're doing hip-focused bridge work, they're both extension chain movements. They should feel fairly close to one another. If there's a big difference, that's a good learning opportunity for you to be like, all right, what are you doing differently in how you're using your muscles from one to the other? And if one feels better than the other, try and get that same sensation from both of them, and you'll upgrade both exercises at the same time. Next question, Iman. Matt, what are your thoughts on David Goggins claiming that he stretches every night for 2 hours? Is this effective? Good heavens, man. Anything that when people tell me that they do something for so much volume, my immediate response is, well, why isn't it very effective if you have to do it for 2 hours? This is the attitude I used to take with things, because I used to have 2-3 hour workouts, and now my workouts are much shorter, not because I'm trying to save time, just because I know how to do it so much more effectively. It's kind of like driving on that nail into the wood. If you're hitting it with a tiny little tap, it's like, oh, I got to do this for 2 hours. I'm like, yeah, but 2 hour requirement means that what you're doing isn't all that effective, that you need to do it for 2 hours kind of thing. And sure, there's always something that you need to do a lot of it in order to make it as effective for your purpose. Like if you want to train marathon running, sometimes you're just going to have to put in the long runs in order to train your mind and body for that kind of exertion of long runs. But good heavens, I can't imagine stretching for 2 hours. Now, again, I haven't done it, so who am I to say? I'm speaking without any such experience. But personally, like I get a lot more mobility training. Like I'm way more mobile and loose now than I ever have been. And I don't stretch at all. And all I'm doing is like stuff like, this throughout the day where I'm stretching my arms up, I'm getting into a deep squat and stuff. My mobility is way better than it used to be. And I'm just holding positions for like 3 or 4 seconds at a time. So that's my question is like, why is it necessary to do it for 2 hours? And if it is necessary, is there the chance that it's not being done very effectively? That's my immediate reaction to that sort of thing. All right, another question here, Matt Tora. Hey, Matt, struggling to get rid of the love handles. Any tips? Not really. Basically, fat is fat. It's all lost throughout the entire body the same way. And always keep in mind, I know you don't want to hear this, but where we store fat is largely genetically determined. So sometimes we'll just have more fat in some areas because that's the way you're built. And as you lose body fat, yes, you lose it all over, and you're going to notice it more in areas where you're thinner. It's the analogy I always use is think of a swimming pool. If you drain 2 feet out of the swimming pool, by the steps where it's shallow, you're going to notice it. You're like, there's 3 steps above the water now. There used to only be 1. But in the deep end, you're not going to notice at all because it's still over your head. Even though it is 2 feet down, it's still over your head. It's still deep. And that's usually the way fat deposits work. You're not going to notice it as much in the thicker areas. And for you, that very well may be in the love handle section. For a lot of guys, it's in the belly kind of thing. So just keep on keeping on. The rules of fat loss are still the same regardless of where it is, but it's going to probably just be a bit longer, and it's going to seem to take longer than you may be anticipating. But that's the bottom line right on there. Good point here, Nathan. Maybe stretching for 2 hours makes him feel good is all. Absolutely. That's very likely the case. And if that's the case, then it's good. It's fantastic. If there's that emotional payoff, then awesome, wonderful, great. Unfortunately, I think I've become, in my older age, a little bit more of just a crotchety old man when it comes to exercise, where I'm like, I don't want to do it just for a pleasure cruise. Like I want to just get in, get out, get it done, and get on with my life kind of thing. So I'm kind of that mentality now, which is why I gave that answer. But yeah, I've heard stories of people who will engage in like yoga, like long yoga classes. And they're like, it just makes me feel good. Okay, that's reason enough to do something. And there's only 2 good reasons to partake in a particular diet or exercise habit. It's either required or it's desired. If it's desired, reason enough right there. Like, I just like doing this. Good. There's reason enough right there. Or if it's required because, if I'm going to be a marathon runner, I've got to be able to run. So it's that simple. So let's see what else we got to wrap things on up. Sorry if I miss any questions. Let's see, Dan Guidance, barbell exercise transfer. Let's see. I hope I didn't miss anybody. I think I got everyone here. Good question here from Matt Torre. Is there anything to add on my push routine? 1 set wall push-ups, 10 seconds, times 10, 1 second, 1 set, 10 seconds, 10-second towel pull, and so on. Not a whole lot. I would say with this routine that you're looking at, the thing to take a look at is if you're pushing your muscles to a good amount of fatigue as you get further in the workout. So first set is oftentimes a little bit of like a wake-up set. This is why Paul Wade, even in combat conditioning too, is like 1 set can do the job. because ultimately, if you really pay attention to how you're creating a stimulus in your workouts, you probably only get most of your benefit or most of that rewarding sensation from only 1 or 2 sets. If you do 10 sets, you're probably going to have 1 or 2 like money sets in there. Like, that was great. The other ones you're just kind of getting through, or you're ramping things up. So with a routine like that, I would say pay attention to your performance in the first set or the second set. And when you're going through the 2 sets, bodyweight dips, 2 sets, shoulder push-ups and stuff, you really pay attention to if that second set is feeling better, and play around with the third set. If that's feeling better than the second set, then great. If it's kind of on the way down, then awesome. You've got a lot of intensity going for you there, and that's the way to think about it. So pay attention to how you're feeling about it, and that's the way that you want to judge how effective it is, because ultimately that's the question we want to have in the back of our mind is this workout being productive? Am I being productive with it? We want to make sure that we're feeling good and getting something out of it on a progressive level. All right, one more question. Just what the hell? Andrew, hey, Matt, I don't feel sore after most of my workouts. Is this a problem? Not at all. It means you're getting in shape. Congratulations. As the saying goes, the soreness we feel comes from a novel stimulus. Basically means you did something new. The results you're looking for come from an effective stimulus. So soreness and an effectiveness, they're kind of correlated. So it doesn't mean it's worthless or bad, but don't chase it either. Like, you don't be sore, that's fine. You don't need to be sore, kind of thing. And you can still definitely have effective workouts if you're performing the exercises better. And if you're never sore, that's perfectly fine. Soreness is not always the best indication of an effective exercise or workout. It just means you did something that your body was kind of on its heels for, a little bit shocked, which in and of itself, I know people are like, you got to shock the body and stuff. Yeah, but that only works if you could do it all the time. If you can only do it once in a while, it's not frequent enough to be a reliable stimulus. And you can create a stimulus without, quote, shocking the body. In fact, it's more like leading the body by the hand rather than shoving it off the cliff. All right, folks, dinner time for me. Thank you so much for watching. I really do sincerely appreciate it. Let me know again in the comments if you felt like this was a better format, going with this different equipment, the microphone, the camera, and everything, or if there was no difference and stuff, then I can just go back to the computer and it's a little easier to read. But anyway, sincerely appreciate. Once again, don't forget, check out the links down below to all the resources I recommend that helps to support RDP and, of course, this podcast. And I will see you next week, same time, 7 o'clock Mountain Standard Time here. That's 9 o'clock Eastern, and we will talk more about fundamental approaches to health and fitness to give you more power, control, and freedom in your fitness. So then be fit and live free.